Hey everyone, Mr. MC here. This is a guide for round 7 of the Nations Cup exhibition season. Let's get this started. Your first braking point is before you reach the 150 meter mark. You want to brake a little early in this car since this car carries a bit more speed and thus needs more braking distance. Brake hard for a while, bring yourself to the inside of the turn while making sure that there's only 2 wheels touching the yellow curb. Do some throttle control, get the car pointing where you want to go, and quickly start to accelerate. Just after you pass the 150 meter mark, or just before the wall on the right ends, that is when you want to start to brake. You'll be braking hard for a while, then gently ease off of the brakes as you turn in. Once again, make sure only 2 wheels are touching the yellow curbs, as if you have 3 wheels touch the curb, you will get an off-track penalty. Then brake before you reach the 50 meter mark, brake hard for a short moment, gently ease off of the brakes. Gently start to accelerate and then brake before you reach the 50 meter mark. Clip the apex, quickly get on the throttle. For this next turn, look for the path that is on the right as you want to brake before you pass it. Brake hard for a short while, gently ease off of the brakes, taking advantage of the curbs, and quickly get on the throttle. You just want to try to set yourself up so you can get a fast exit out of these series of turns. Look for the 100 meter sign as you want to brake before you pass it, so brake hard for a short while, gently ease off of the brakes. When the shadow ends, you want to start to accelerate and you will be good to go. But that is all for the lap guide. Let's finish up this lap and then we'll go ahead and talk about the strategies. For the qualifying session, you will have 10 minutes to try to get a good qualifying time. Slipstream is going to be essential here, so before you start your actual qualifying lap, you want to make sure that you find someone that you can get the slipstream out from so your car can go even faster and get yourself a better qualifying time. Your tires will also be cold, so make sure you try to warm them up before you start your first qualifying lap. Don't forget that the slipstream range is 3/4 of a second, so it's not 1.5 seconds like how it was a while back. So as you see here, I'm within the slipstream range of the car ahead of me, and you basically just want to make sure that you are within that slipstream range, so once again, you can go even faster. Just make sure that you brake a little earlier because you're going faster than usual. You also want to make sure that you can get as squeaky clean of a lap as possible because any mistake will end up hurting your qualifying time. This will also obviously apply to the race as well. You also want to try to make sure that you do not get any track penalties, as that's going to invalidate your time. I say this because the second chicane is a really easy spot to get an off-track penalty. As I said in the lap guide, you want to make sure that only 2 wheels are touching the yellow curbs at the chicane. If 3 or more wheels end up touching the curb, and this applies for both the first and second part of the chicane, on both chicanes actually, then you will get an off-track penalty. So you just want to be careful as you navigate through the chicanes. After you do your qualifying lap, you can do the jump out and jump back in strategy. So this is where you press options, exit, and in the lobbies you can press enter course, or for the actual race day itself you press the qualifying button. This will spawn you back in at the pit box, so all you have to do now is only do the out lap and then you start your next qualifying lap. This basically saves you from having to do an in lap and go through the animation sequence. But because the Tyre Wear isn't such a big deal here, you can either decide to go with the jump out and jump back in method, or you can decide to do as many laps as you can in one long qualifying stint. Whichever strategy you do, you just want to make sure that you keep going at it until you run out of time. For the race itself, this is a no-stop race. Every single car in the Group 4 class can do a no stop here, and yes, that includes the front wheel drives. Not that I would suggest them, because at least in my experience testing them here, I was having a really bad time. But anyways, so the first car that we're going to review is the Bugatti Veyron. So this car kind of came out of nowhere, at least for me. This is going to be one of the best cars, probably the best car for you to choose for this race, as this car has a ton of speed. Add the slipstream in and you're going to be flying away from your competition. This car also has pretty good acceleration. You just have to make sure that you shift early with this car, since this car does lose power as you go higher up in revs. So I would say you shift around 75% of the shift bar being full. The nice thing about this car is that it's a 4-wheel drive, so it is a pretty stable ride, especially as you go through the chicanes, so you won't have to worry about spinning out. However, because this car does weigh more than a mountain, you do have to be careful as you go through the turns, as it is a little understeery. This will be a lot more notable towards the last couple of laps, as the tire wear will slowly start to kick in. It's not bad enough to where you have to go to the pit stop, but it's bad enough, and I say that with quotation marks, it's bad enough to where if you brake just a little too late, you're going to be understeering for days. And going back to the slipstream part, we're just going to illustrate how fast this car is. So we are under the slipstream of first place, and we're going to be going really fast until we reach our first braking point for this new lap. And we're going to end up hitting 160 miles per hour just as we approach our first braking point. And if you are under the slipstream, please make sure you brake a little earlier than usual, because once again, you're going much faster than usual and you don't want to punt the car ahead of you. The other thing, which is still relating to slipstream, is to try to stay under it for as long as you can, because the moment that you lose a slipstream, then you are going to get left behind. And this doesn't just apply to the Veyron, this applies to all cars, especially cars that you end up using that don't have the top end speed as the Veyron. So we're just going to skip on over to the end of the race, and we are going to end up having the little understeer effect kick in, and this is because the tire wear is slowly starting to kick in just enough for me to understeer off track. So this is what I mean about trying to make sure you know where to brake a little earlier if necessary. So let's say that you don't like the Veyron, you don't like how it handles, it understeers too much for you. Are there any other cars that could fill in the spot for you? If you're looking for a mid-engine rear-wheel drive car, the McLaren 650S could be the car for you. So this was actually the first car that I was using before I found out about the Veyron. This car does a pretty good job going through the turns, but it does trade away some of that speed for the handling. It can still keep up with the Veyrons as long as you stay within their slipstream. This car is also mostly stable, so it shouldn't bring up too much of a problem as you go through the chicanes, especially the second one. You just need to make sure that you don't hit the curbs too harshly, otherwise the car will squirm a bit. But other than that, this car is still a pretty stable ride overall. The best thing about this car, at least for this race, is that its tire wear is not much of a problem at all. Yes, you will get some tire wear, but it shouldn't be much of a problem compared to that of the Veyron. So let's skip on over to the end of the race. I do get a bit of the understeer kicking in, but still not as big of a deal as that of the Veyron. But this car was still a pretty enjoyable ride. So if you're looking for a mid-engine rear-wheel drive car, then take a look at the McLaren 650S. And lastly, we'll take a look at a front-engine rear-wheel drive alternative. And the car that we'll be looking at is the Jaguar F-Type. This car has a ton of speed, but it is a little bit on the unstable side. This will be the most notable as you're exiting the first chicane. If you get on the throttle too early, the rear wheels will spin, and that can cause you to spin out. So you want to try to catch it early on, or just be nice and patient with the throttle so you don't have to worry about that issue at all. And the tire wear shouldn't be much of an issue, but you just want to keep an eye on your tires towards the last 1 to 2 laps. So if you're starting to notice some of the tire wear kick in, adjust your driving so you can make sure that you still stay on track. And once again, try to not get any track penalties because it's going to get really frustrating, especially at the second chicane. And at this point, I've had enough of it, so I decided to just back out of this lobby. And last but not least, the Peugeot RCZ has incredible acceleration, but there are quite a few downfalls. One of it being that it doesn't have the top end speed, so you need to stay under slipstream at all times to be able to keep up with the other cars. The other thing is that for some reason this car almost spun out on me. I don't know how to explain what happened right there, but this car, I don't know how, I just almost lost control on it, so that already gave me a pretty bad impression on the RCZ. And this ended up happening a couple of times in this race, so this wasn't just an isolated incident. And the front wheel drives, like the RCZ, they're pretty understeered to begin with, so you're going to find yourself fighting with the car quite a bit, especially as you exit the chicanes. And that's if you don't end up getting a lot of check penalties like how I do over here. And with the tire wear mixed in, it just makes the car a little more understeered, and overall, I just did not have a good experience with this car. But if you absolutely must use a front wheel drive car for some reason, then take a look at the Peugeot RCZ. But at the end of the day, this is a no-stop race no matter which car you're in. You just want to make sure that you're in a car that has good acceleration, good top speed, decent handling, just a car that can keep up with the pack. The Bugatti Veyron Gr is going to be the go-to car for this race, but there are other cars that can be a contender. So if you're looking for a mid-engine car, try out the McLaren 650S. If you're looking for a front-engine rear-wheel drive car, take a look at the Jaguar F-Type. And if you really must use a front-wheel drive car, then take a look at the Peugeot RCZ. But that is pretty much it from me. I'm going to go ahead and sign off now. So this is Mr. MCA. Try not to get punted, and I'll see you in the next video.